Welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart. This is MommaFoxFire, and I am thrilled to be here with you for another episode that's bound to tug at your heartstrings and hopefully tickle your funny bone as well. Before we dive into today's topic, let me take a moment to express my gratitude for each and every one of you for tuning in. Your support and messages, they really do light up my world. Seriously, it's like having a cozy blanket made of love, and who wouldn't want that? Now, I know life can be a bit like a taco on Tuesday, messy, unpredictable, and sometimes falling apart, but we still love those tacos even as we pick up the pieces. So pull up a virtual chair, grab your favorite beverage, and let's embark on another journey together. Today's episode is a gem. We are getting into the art of finding peace and reconciliation with the fantastic Keith Wilson. He's not just a therapist, he's like a wizard of the emotional realm, weaving insights and wisdom into the fabric of our lives. In a world where conflicts are as common as coffee stains on Monday mornings, Keith sheds light on strategies that can turn those clashes into opportunities for growth. We're talking about genuine apologies that are more than just words. They're promises for change and for a better tomorrow. Ever wondered how creativity plays a role in reconciliation? Well, get ready for some mind-bending revelations. Keith will share how to find unique solutions and how those can be the secret sauce in mending relationships and finding that elusive peace. But wait, there's more. We'll touch on the importance of feedback, the reflective, eclectic approach to psychotherapy, and the power of self-exercises in enhancing personal growth. It's like a buffet of insights, and you are invited to feast your ears. So buckle up, y'all. This is not just a podcast, it's a journey, and you're not alone. Stick around because today we're unwrapping the art of finding peace and reconciliation, one delicious layer at a time. Let's get to it. Hello, welcome back to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. Super excited to have this conversation. I know that I missed last week. I was out of town, but we are back at it this week with a fantastic conversation lined up for you. We are going to be talking about the art of finding peace and reconciliation. And this topic is one that I am really looking forward to because, you know, sometimes you go through your day and you just want to fight, or I do. Maybe not everyone feels that way. Sometimes you just want to fight. So I would love to get some tips, and we're joined today by Keith Wilson. He's going to give us all those little nuggets and bits that are going to help us with the art of finding peace and reconciliation. So Keith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, MommaFoxFire.
So a little bit about Keith before we just dive in here. Keith is a psychotherapist in a private practice in Rochester, New York, with more than 35 years of experience. And he's the author of a few books: The Road to Reconciliation, a comprehensive guide to peace when relationships go bad; How to Make an Apology You'll Never Have to Make Again; and Constructive Conflict, Building Something Good Out of All Those Arguments. That's probably the one that I need the most, if I'm being honest. Okay. He also wrote 3 novels and innumerable articles on mental health, addiction, and relationships in the online platform Medium. So if anyone is looking to connect with Keith, I'm going to post his website right here. You can go on there and find all of his contact information and everything. And again, Keith, I'm really excited for this conversation. Thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, no problem.
So for those who are here in chat, we do have a question queue open. If you have a question, feel free to pop it in, type !Q, follow with your question, put that into the chat, and I'll make sure to get it asked. And I see a couple people here already. Thank you for being here. Please engage, ask anything you want to ask. That's what we're here for. So Keith, can you tell us a little about your experiences, what made you become interested in specializing in mental health to begin with?
Well, I suppose I did this because I couldn't really do anything else. When I was 19, I decided I was a hippie homesteader. So I picked up roots and came out to Western New York from Connecticut and bought a little bit of land and built a cabin and lived pretty much off the grid for a few years, until I decided I really didn't like it. I, at the time, was wanting a sawmill, and I just got bored with picking little pieces of wood out of big pieces of wood. So I decided I was going to go to college. And, when you live out in the middle of nowhere with no electricity, you have kerosene lamps and plenty of time to read. So I had, by that point, really had an education. I read Freud and Jung and all the psychologists, and kind of got interested in doing that when I went to school. And it turned out that there was quite a need for it. In the rural area where I was living, there wasn't any. Uh, There was such a big need; they didn't really care if you had the proper credentials or not. So I
Oh,
got
wow.
started, well, long before I really got properly educated. Um, but then I did get properly educated, and now I'm living in the big city here, Rochester, and I've been doing this work for about 35 years at this point.
That's pretty cool. So how did you, I mean, listen, I'm a millennial, right? And there's no money to be had. There's no homes to be had. So how did you at 19 move? How did you buy land at 19? That's my main question.
I probably wouldn't have been able to now. I mean, things were cheap. I paid like 300 an acre for 20 acres. I had, saved up money working in a restaurant. I was very thrifty, and and I think things were a lot easier back then
Yeah.
for a lot of people. I really, my heart goes out to young people today try to get started.
Yeah. Same. I mean, same here. Every time I hear,
Yeah.
you know, every time I hear of someone who's like, I can't buy a house because how am I supposed to save up the money because rent is so high? It's just a vicious cycle, right? But it's so interesting to hear from folks who were able to say, I I was a waiter and I was able to save up money to do this. It's so different now that kind of thing is just fascinating to me.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Well, a house cost me $300 to build with used materials and all that kind of thing. So,
Wow.
yeah. Of course, that was a different time, so that's
Yeah.
when that kind of money really meant was worth something. But
Yeah.
still, you scrounge around and you're not too particular. You could probably
Mm-hmm.
do something like that in the right place.
Yeah. That's really neat. And this was all in New York at the time?
Yeah, the Western New York is not what people think of usually when they think of New York. It's very rural out in Western New York, and my nearest neighbor was about a half mile away.
Yeah. That's really neat. One of my coworkers is from Watertown,
Yeah,
Waterton, something like that.
Watertown. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And she always talks about how everyone, you hear New York and you have a very particular picture in your mind. And she's like, that's not what I grew up with,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is pretty cool. So, what is your favorite thing about working in the mental health field now? And what are the biggest challenges?
Well, at this point, I'm old enough I could be retired. I chose not to because I like to meet different kinds of people. I'm not exactly an extrovert by any means, but I do like to get out of myself and see how other people live. And so that's kind of why I still do it. And I like to think I also help people in the process. I guess that's why they come. Um, but yeah, that's why I do that. Um, I'm afraid, a lot of people my age, their world becomes very small,
Mm,
or they and very curated. They just experience the things that they want to. But I like to have a breath of fresh air, and some unpredictable things happen, and it certainly happens that way in this line of work.
I'm sure. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face in the mental health field?
Oh, without a question, it's how it's paid for.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. With insurance and all the malarkey you got to go through. Um, yeah, it's, I think we have agreed to a devil's bargain by agreeing to be paid by insurance and putting ourselves under the medical model. That brings up all kinds of problems with the way we really want to, most of us really want to treat people, because we have to conform to certain expectations. We have to find a diagnosis and, do something that, uh, insurance companies want a quick fix. A lot of clients want a quick fix, of course, if they're suffering very much, but I find that most clients really want to dig in and find out what's wrong, and they're really more interested in understanding themselves. You know, I always ask clients a question, put in a sentence what you would like to get out of coming. And probably 3/4 of them say, I want to know why I do the things I do. And at first I'm like, why do you want to know why? Don't you just want to do things different? Okay. Don't you want to, feel better? No, I want to know why.
Mhm.
And so it just turns out that why is a very hard question to answer. But it's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And I think people grow when they ask that question.
Mm-hmm. And it's a hard question to answer in whatever insurance provides, right? 5 sessions or something. Sometimes people only get.
No. Well, yeah, you can't. You can just scratch the surface after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times on this show we've talked about what a terror insurance can be. It's such a scam.
Mhm.
So I don't envy you those challenges at all. Do you have an all-time favorite book or one that you wish more folks would take the time to read?
Well, it's not directly related to mental health.
That's okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I read, Moby Dick probably 10 times when I was a kid. And then a few times as an adult. And when I was writing my first novel, which is called Fate's Jailers, a mopping up madness at a mental health clinic. It is a novel, a bit of a spoof on the mental health system. But I started writing that book, and after I got about 3/4 full, I was taking a look at the overall storyline, and I surprised myself. I realized I was writing Moby Dick. This novel set in a mental health clinic
Mhm.
was the plot of Moby Dick. There
That's
was a
amazing.
director who was fanatical and chasing after his own white whale, which were insurance companies. And, you had a crew that were kind of along for the ride, and so on and so forth. So when I saw that, I decided, okay, I'll just go for it. I'll rewrite both.
Lean in. Yeah, lean into it.
But that's kind of the way that stories, narratives can kind of seep into your bones and become part of you without you ever really, intending on it.
Yeah. And that's a great book in general. So it doesn't surprise me, that if that one had a big impact on you when you went to write your first one, that's kind of logical, right? If you're going to write your first novel or first book, it's probably going to mimic a little bit whatever your favorite is.
Right, right.
But that's cool. It's neat that you realized it and then leaned into it. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, yeah. Really, I think all fiction and maybe all literature is really fan fiction.
I love that.
it's based on something that you read before, and you're wanting to revise or wanting to, create something of your own.
I love that.
Yeah.
All fiction is really fan fiction because it's based on something that you enjoy. That's fantastic. Well, that's great. So, switching to our topic tonight a little bit, in your extensive experience as a psychotherapist, what are some common patterns or challenges that you see in relationships that can contribute to conflicts, and how can folks proactively address some of those issues?
Well, I think just the fact that, when you're with other people, those other people are other people. Yeah, they have their own points of view, their own history, their own biases, their own dreams, and they're not yours.
Mhm.
And I don't think we're often prepared for that. We would much rather. I, we behave as if we would much rather other people were just extensions of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're not, then we have some conflicts because we try to get them to act the way that we want them to, and yet they are themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I've seen lots of different kinds of people. I'm very much a generalist. I've seen everybody from folks with serious schizophrenia to the family members that worry about them, and everybody in between, people traumatized, lots of folks with substance abuse, violence. I worked at a clinic with sex offenders at one point. And what they all have in common is broken relationships.
Mm.
Either the broken or disconnected relationship is somehow related to the condition and the mental health problem in the first place, in many cases, or the mental health condition sometimes causes the broken relationship. Okay. Not that they, the client, the person with the condition ever really intends that,
Sure.
but it does that. And then folks, get patched up without really trying to mend those relationships. And yet I think mending them is a very crucial part of anybody's recovery.
Mm-hmm.
You could take a pill and probably feel better, but you're not really doing any better until you are able to reconnect with the folks that you got disconnected from. And sometimes you have to get past injured feelings or disappointments and all that in order to do that. So, I found that people are often very lost when it comes to restoring relationships.
Do you think that if more people went to therapy, that some of that would be prevented? Some of their conflicts might be prevented if everybody went to therapy a little.
Well, I would like to think that. The truth of the matter, I think many of us therapists are growing more and more aware of this, but I think we have also contributed to a great deal of self-centered behavior by focusing so much on the individual and the individual's self-actualization and all that kind of thing, at the exclusion of the relationships that they're in. My very first interns, I was first an intern. My very first mentor told me that all my best clients get divorced. They get better, he was seeing a lot of depressed nurses, at the time, and they'd see them and they'd get over their depression and then they'd get a divorce. Okay. Well, uh, I mean, maybe their husbands deserved it. I have no idea. But I mean, the point is that the mental health care was not really helping the relationship very much. Yeah. When all that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and who knows, maybe their relationship wasn't worth saving, but yeah, I mean, I could see if you're going to therapy and you're only working on yourself. And of course, you as a therapist only get my perspective, right? So you don't hear the other person and there's,
Yeah,
you know,
we can guess though,
yeah, yeah,
because because if I'm with you,
hmm
I mean, you and I are now in a relationship, and
right.
sometimes the same things come up
As
there
as in a
as they do
relationship.
elsewhere. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how we often figure this out. Yeah.
Well, that's a good insight because my therapist seems to sometimes just be able to call me on my bullshit way quicker than I would expect anyone to be able to. So it's definitely a relationship.
Yeah. Well, he's probably seen some bullshit before.
No, I'm sure. I am sure. Can you share some key principles or strategies from some of your books that folks can apply to help them navigate conflicts and find reconciliation?
Oh, well, that's a big question. Okay. Well, I mean, the book you said that you wanted to get yourself, Perspective Conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is a book I wrote. It's not a terribly original one. The ideas I presented there are um, are kind of old ideas, but I felt that there needed to be a book that did it.
Mm,
And basically, the whole premise of the book is that if you're in a relationship, there's going to be conflicts because you got two people who have two different ways of doing things. And so, and actually, the conflicts is what you want. Um, no matter who you are with, uh, no matter what two people get together, one of them is going to be stingier than the other. One of them is going to be neater than the other. One of them is going to be hornier than the other. One of them is going to be closer to their family than the other. And the whole down the whole line of characteristics like that. And that's actually an advantage to being a couple because being a couple is kind of a natural thing in the same way that we have two eyes and we have two ears because this gives us two different perspectives on things. Okay, so we have these two different perspectives on things, and that makes us all the more likely that we're going to see the truth, okay, or to know what we're going to do because we have more choices. But the people got to work these things out in a respectful kind of way, and often we don't. So the whole idea of the book is what are the regulations by which you can regulate conflict so that it doesn't destroy things. Conflicts, like electricity, it can really light things up, but it can also burn the house down.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it too, because, I have a lot of conflict at work and
Mhm.
it's not a fight, but conflict is what helps you improve things. If you don't have any conflict, if everyone is just saying, yes, yes, that's great, good job, nothing's going to get better before we submit it to a client. So if I don't bring the conflict, which is mostly what I wind up doing at work, is bringing a little bit of a challenge to whatever team I'm working with, then nothing gets better. And it's the same in relationships. I feel like if you're not challenging one another, which does create a little bit of conflict, then kind of what's the point?
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you want a pretty simple tip, which is not easy to do, but most people can do it. And if it can make a big difference is when you're having a difficult conversation with somebody and they say something, before you answer back, put your point of view or anything like that, summarize what they just said and bounce it back at them. And just to, check to see if you have it right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, uh, three things can happen when you do that. You could have it right, okay, and in which case the other person feels heard, okay, and you have accurate information by which to, answer them. Or you can have it wrong, okay, which means, you're not listening, or maybe they said it wrong. So they'll try it again, and you keep on doing that till you get it right. And that one little thing, probably more than anything, can help people with conflicts.
Yeah. And that's very similar to a concept that I learned it in college, I think. And then we use it all the time at my job, but it's the LAER communication. So it's listen, acknowledge, explore, respond. So it's like you got to listen to what they're saying, acknowledge it by repeating it back and summarizing to give them a chance, and then explore some things before you even give a response to something. So you're taking it in, you're repeating it back, and then you're poking it a little bit to make sure you fully understand before you actually respond. But yeah, I mean, that's something that if more people would give folks a chance to say, it's not exactly what I meant, instead of just jumping to oh, I'm going to jump down your throat because you said something I don't like, but maybe it's not how they meant it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other examples or strategies for turning conflicts into opportunities for kind of growth and understanding?
Well, the other thing is if you find yourself starting to get a little upset, probably nothing much good is going to happen after that. So in that case, it's a good thing to stop the conversation. But the trouble is, if you try to stop the conversation, the other person can look upon that as an aggressive act or selfish act of its own. They can say you're, stonewalling.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I tell people to do. I tell people this. I think of a traffic light. It turns yellow before it turns red. So if you start to get upset, then you say something about this, like, sorry, that just came out wrong, or we started wrong, or, despite all this, I love you, or, something to kind of try to set it back on track first. Okay. Now, often that works wonderful, and then you can proceed. But when it doesn't, then you gotta have a red light, and then you say something like, I'm sorry, I can't go on with this, I'm starting to get upset. Can we take a break and talk about this later? Now, later can be like 20 minutes later. Often that's all it takes, really, to calm down. But you should go back to it after you do something like that. So I mean, that's a way of removing yourself from a conversation that's starting to get heated before things start to get worse.
Yeah. We have Bite Mark says that's when you need a safe word. That's true. And
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, you can use a safe word, same kind of, provided you got to set it up properly. But the key with that is, you can't abuse it. You've got to go back and finish up the conversation, or you start getting this reputation as a person who's just trying to duck conflict. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were plenty of times where in my marriage, my ex would storm off, all that good stuff. And then we would never revisit whatever it was. Now, granted, we had lots of issues, lots of things going on that we don't necessarily need to get into. It was an unhealthy relationship, and I'll leave it at that for our purposes here today. But, it was one of those things that if it was a serious conversation that I was trying to communicate in, and he got upset and stomped off, and then we never revisited it, it was not useful to me. There was nothing, I got nothing out of those moments except to just be angry. So coming back and making sure that you're revisiting something, if you've set up a series of stoplight phrases or a safe word system or something like that, then that's great. But making sure that you come back to it sounds like it's really key.
Yeah.
Is there a good way, like a good model to say, a timeout system, or we're going to revisit it in a certain amount of time? Or is it just like, I'm going to take the time I need, and then I'll let you know when we can come back and resume this conversation?
Yeah, well, it's best to say that I need the time. Okay, I'm not doing this because of something you're doing necessarily. Right. Okay, because then you get into an argument about all that stuff. But no, I need a time. I'm having trouble. So I need, a little break. And sometimes it's a good idea to say, I'm going to go outside and, rake the leaves for a half an hour. Okay. As opposed to just kind of disappearing. And now, your partner's wondering what the heck's going on. And then they're texting you because they're wanting to know where you are, and that's annoying you even more. Okay. So, signal your intentions, basically.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I feel like anytime a safe word is used, that needs to be revisited later anyway.
Yeah.
In either context, right? Whether we're talking about sex or conflict. If you need to talk about it later. If you've gotten to the point in sex where you're having to use a safe word, you need to talk about what happened. If you're talking about it in conflict, in a relationship, you need to talk about what happened also. That's a great... Actually, I know you're not trying to derail, you said, but that's not a derail. Like, that's a really good point. If you get to a point where you're having to stop the situation, no matter the situation, you got to revisit it later to make sure all parties understand what happened and why.
Yeah.
All right, we have a great question in the chat, and that is, what is your favorite poem? And I love this question.
Oh, my favorite poem. The first thing that comes to mind is the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Yeah. It's very rich. There's a lot of imagery in there. And it's sort of about a person who is having trouble making up his mind and frittering his life away, and has a crush on somebody, but is afraid to say anything.
That's a great one. I haven't read that one, but it looks like it's a pretty long one too. So I'll have to go back and read that one later.
Right,
sure.
right. And your cat will enjoy some parts of it.
Okay. All right, I'll have to wake him up and make sure that he's listening. Oh, he'll get mad at me for waking him up, but as long as I pet him the whole time, he'll be fine. So we've been talking about conflict and how it's a natural part of relationships, which is very true. But also, as we've been talking, it's clear that it is really challenging to navigate it, whether it's a natural part of relationships or not. How do you guide either couples? Do you see couples, first of all, I guess in your practice? Yeah. So how do you guide couples and or individuals in distinguishing between this is a healthy conflict that fosters growth and this is a detrimental conflict that erodes relationships? How do you counsel people in determining that?
Well, I don't know that any conflict is necessarily toxic.
Mm.
I mean, just the fact that you have a disagreement over something. It can be as minor as, what to have for dinner tonight, or something as major as, oh, I want to have children, but I don't, or I want to see other people, and I don't. I mean, the conflict itself, I don't really see as being toxic.
Mm.
I see what you do with it as being toxic, and usually what you do with it, it's toxic when you try to force things, when you try to force things with violence or ultimatum, or uh, be abusive, or manipulative. I mean, that's all. There's 1,000 ways of forcing things,
Mhm.
and they all erode trust, and they all hurt people, and cause problems. And it's all. A lot of people don't realize that violence, for instance, it is a way of avoiding conflict, because what you're trying to do here is use physical force to end the conflict. Okay.
Interesting.
Rather than, okay, we're in conflict. We don't know what to do here. There's just two of us, and each of us gets a vote. Okay, and we're deadlocked. Okay. Um, it's kind of interesting what couples do with that sometimes. They do a lot of things because everybody hates to compromise. Compromise is one, you know. You can define compromise two ways. You can define it, when both parties are unhappy. Okay, that's compromise. Or, both parties are partly happy. But I mean, couples do a lot of different things with that. I mean, the old system of the husband being in charge, well, that was a way to resolve conflict. Okay.
Mhm.
Right. And if we turn the tables so the wife is in charge, well, there you go, the same kind of thing. Some couples, they uh assign different areas of life. You do the bookkeeping, I do the kids, that kind of thing. Okay. And so whoever is the vice president in charge of accounting in the marriage. Okay, well, then they handle the money, and they make most of the decisions on the advice of the other one. But you pretty much have that one making the decisions. Um, Other couples, they solve these impasses by outing, and I mean, sometimes the best way to do it is whoever cares the most gets their way. So if my wife wants to go for Mexican food just a little bit, okay, and I want to go to Chinese food a lot, okay, well, I get my way because I want it more than she does. Right. But if you do that too much, then it's the biggest baby that always wins. Okay. Right. So it may be a worthwhile exercise for any couple to talk about, just set up a constitution, I guess. How are you going to resolve these things that have to be resolved? Okay. Not everything has to be resolved. She wants Mexican and I want Chinese. I guess we can go to two different places for takeout. There's there's that way too. But yeah.
So you really see conflict as this kind of neutral thing, and it's the reactions around the conflict that can take it into this is helpful, this is hurtful territory.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we have very unrealistic expectations about how much, say, romantic couples are supposed to agree on things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't need to agree. I certainly don't need to agree on Chinese or Mexican on any given night. Okay, you can have a disagreement on that and still love each other. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So now all right, so there's conflict. And there's a little bit of sometimes apologizing if you took it into maybe that toxic territory a little bit. So that's a significant aspect of repairing relationships is the apology piece, right? So
Mhm.
what makes a genuine and effective apology, and how can the way you apologize contribute to the reconciliation process?
Okay. You know those notes that people will write down? They'll say IOU, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
$10 or whatever. That's what an apology is.
Okay.
Okay. It's an IOU. Okay. A lot of people misunderstand what apologies are because, often if I'm wrong and I have to apologize, it's humiliating for me to have to do that. So a lot of people believe that because it's so hard to make an apology, that once you make it, you've already made amends. Okay.
Mhm.
And no, you haven't done anything. You've just made a promise to make amends when you've made that apology. Um, the true correction occurs later on in, whether you do it again or whether you do something to make up for it.
Yeah, that's something that I think so I have a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I think the
Yeah.
16-year-old kind of has it now, but the 10-year-old sometimes struggles a little bit to understand that the apology is not the forgiveness at the same time. Like you can say,
Mhm.
"Oh, mom, I'm sorry." I don't get him in trouble very much for breaking stuff because he has Tourette's and sometimes his tics cause him to break things. We live with it. That's fine. But every now and then he'll do something that wasn't quite kind or something like that. And he'll say, "Oh, mom, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Thank you for apologizing. We'll move forward with our day and hopefully the rest of the day is better." And,
Mhm.
it's been a little bit of a struggle for him to understand, like, I said I'm sorry. You're supposed to say it's okay.
Mhm.
And I try to be really careful not to say that it's okay. I'm like, thank you for apologizing. I'm glad you recognize that you needed to apologize and that situation called for an apology. And, you're going to be treated with a little bit of kid gloves for a little bit of time because of whatever the actual, for some reason, an example is not popping into my head right now, but there are plenty of them. Don't worry.
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
but, that's hard. That's a hard concept to understand. And I don't know that many adults quite understand it either.
No, I don't think so. No, no. Yeah, you should not be giving forgiveness right after an apology either. Well, I mean, sort of, maybe. Somebody apologizes and they say they want to, make amends. You can kind of give them some kind of provisional forgiveness,
Mhm.
so that you're still in relationship so that they can make amends. Okay. But I mean, the book should not be closed
Yeah.
until later, when change occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, Bite Mark to the rescue because she says didn't unload the dishes after he was asked to, or threw a stick after being told not to throw the stick, which are definitely two things that my child does. And
Yeah.
we've talked about the dishes in particular. Hey, did you unload the dishes like I asked you to? Oh no, sorry. And I'll say to him, like, don't say you're sorry, just go do it. Just
Right.
oops, I'll go do it, because that's how you make up for it is the action that you're taking. And then, yeah, the things like throwing a stick after being told not to throw the stick, you can't unthrow the stick, right? So that's a little harder.
Right.
It's a little
Right.
harder, but it's something that, next
Right.
time you're told not to throw a stick and you don't throw it, that's when it's real. That's
Yeah.
when I know that you meant it. Uh,
I had a guy once who every now and then he would kind of go ape shit. He'd start throwing furniture around the house and hitting holes in walls and stuff like that. And he never hurt any people, but certainly scared the bejeebers out of his whole family.
Yeah.
And they insisted that he go to counseling, and he was very sorry for having done that, and wanted to wanted to make amends, and wanted their forgiveness. But here's the problem: as awful as that behavior was, it never happened very often. It maybe happened once or twice a year. Okay, so how is he going to show to anybody that he's making amends? Okay, they can still be, I mean, years and years could go by, and his family could be still waiting for the next shoe to drop. Well, so I asked him that, and it took a long time before we came up with an answer. And what this person finally came up with was, all right, what was happening for him was he was letting little things get to him all the time without saying anything. And then he'd, store up all these grievances, and then he'd blow. Okay, so what he decided he was going to do is every single day he was going to talk to his family about how he was feeling about things. Okay. Now that's something he can do every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And every single day the family can see whether he's doing them or not. Okay. And so that's the way he was making amends there. Mm-hmm. And it worked, because once he started doing that, then there was no need to, bust up furniture clear.
It didn't all pile up and everything.
Right. So the ideal thing, I mean, if you have a serious offense that you've made like that, okay, then the ideal thing would be to, choose something that you can do every single day that would contribute to that never happening again. And that's the thing that you're doing to make amends.
Yeah. I really like that example, because it's something that, you're doing on purpose, and especially if you're communicating that to your loved ones of, here's why we're going to start doing this or something. It shows constant, continuous action as prevention, which is great. So when someone is facing a challenge, how do you encourage them to tap into their creativity, and what role does being a little creative, like coming up with something like that, what role does that play in the reconciliation process?
Oh, well, I think to come up with that thing, what we had to do was really dig into how his temper tantrums got started. Right. So, and that's hard for people sometimes because, at some point they get kind of carried away. And sometimes what happens after they have the temper tantrum kind of overshadows everything before. Okay. Now, so we had to do that in order to come up with that kind of solution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is, offenders were victims and victims become offenders. Okay, mm-hmm. So this guy was actually responding to other people's offenses, little ones, mm-hmm. the son not doing the dishes, that kind of thing, when he asked him to, right? So those things were building up, and he failed to process them properly. Okay. And instead he, started breaking up furniture. So, this is where it gets really complicated because, offenders are victims. Okay. And yet, if you talk too much about their being a victim, that can obscure the offense. Okay.
Right.
So you have to balance this kind of thing. Um, but the offender does have to talk about his sense of being a victim, because that's where the offense comes from, and that's where the solution is probably going to come from.
Mm.
Is right from there. So I think this does take some creativity. It primarily, I don't know, if creativity is really the real word. It takes a certain amount of openness and a willingness to, you know, take a look at something, even though it doesn't seem like it's right at first, and um and see what you can do with it. I guess that's creativity.
Yeah, I mean, being willing to look at a situation and then re-examine from another angle. I think that takes a lot of creativity and self-reflection also, to say like, okay, how can I look at this from a different perspective? That does take a little bit of creativity, I think.
Right. Right.
Do you have a lot of clients who come to you and say, listen, I'm looking to find peace in my life, and what are some of your biggest tips that you say to them?
Well, it depends on what's now giving them peace.
Mm.
Now you have folks who are looking for peace because they're in chaotic environments. Their spouse is uh, an addict, and you never know how he's going to behave tomorrow, or that kind of thing. So, in a case like that, um, they have to solve these problems. They have to they have to find some safety in order to ever find some peace. Um, so, I mean, one thing I do with folks like that, whether they decide whether they're going to ever leave that situation or not, they need to devise some kind of an escape plan,
Mm.
so that they at least have that option. So for those folks, no peace is possible until there's some safety, some sense of safety. Okay. Now you have other folks where that's not why they're seeking peace. I mean, their relationships and everybody, that's fine, but the war is inside their head. Okay. And usually what's happening there is all the people in their lives before that, okay, who said all these nasty things to them. Well, they're still renting space there,
Yeah.
and they're still bullying that person around. Okay, so now we have the same kind of thing going on. We have, except instead of a flesh and blood person who's causing you not to be safe, you have a person inside your head, okay, causing you not to be safe. Right. Right. So you have to somewhat do the same kinds of operations with that imaginary, that introjected person, and begin to set some limits on them, and create some kind of an escape plan.
I'd imagine it's
Right. And then you have other people where, the problem isn't the people they live with. The problem isn't, the things in their heads. I mean, they just look at the world. Okay. You look at the world and you see what's happening, and, you want some peace. Well, you have to find a way where the place where the world is not going to affect you. Got to be able to perhaps tune into the good of the world, or the beautiful of the world, in order to find some peace.
Yeah, that's tough right now.
Yeah.
That's tough. But yeah, I mean, there are There are plenty of times where I'll, even just today, I was in the car with the kids, getting them from school, and I'd had enough. I'd had enough of just bad news and interviews about bad news and everything.
Right.
And so I switched it to the classical station. I was like, we're going to listen to some violins and pianos now, just for a little while. But
Hmm.
sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
But going back to the imagined person in your head, right? It sucks because that person always knows what to say.
Hmm.
They always know exactly what to say to get under your skin because they're the one in your head.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh,
Well, yeah, that is a person of your own creation. You can think of that as a little bit of artificial intelligence.
oh, there you go.
Um, and the origin of that, I mean, for a lot of people, it originated with their parents. You were a child, and you wanted to be able to predict what your parent was going to do. So if you were going to go crawling up on the kitchen counter and swiping a cookie, you wanted to know whether your father was going to, laugh at you or give you another cookie or, beat you with a belt.
Mhm.
Okay. So what you did was you constructed a simulation of your father in your head. Okay. And um, just like a meteorologist will construct a simulation of the climate, so if the temperature goes up 3 degrees in Ecuador, how many polar bears are going to die in the Arctic, when they run this simulation. Um, and so you have this simulation, and this becomes an entity inside your head that is constantly preparing you for dealing with your father. Now, not all of them originate with the father. I mean, sometimes, um, like I'm a writer, I have a writer's critic, so I write, and I have a voice inside my head saying, this is crap. Okay. Right. Well, I asked that voice, why do you say it's crap? Well, look, you got the semicolon in the wrong place. Well, that's that's some information I need. But if all he says is it's just crap, then it's not very helpful. Okay, so the point is these little robots that we have are things that we designed and put there um, to help us predict and help us navigate our social world. Um, and but but here's the thing: once we make them, we program with what to say and all that kind of thing. But then we have to give them free will because we can't tell them what to say. Then it wouldn't really be a true simulation. Okay, so you have this thing in your head that has its own free will that's constantly criticizing you. Um, and you set it up so that you can be prepared for all the criticisms you're apt to get. You can't change it because you created it to have a
Right.
will of its own. Right? Yeah. Yeah. All you can do really is maybe set up another one, okay, that counters him. So, you have the evil devil and the other one that's telling you that you're wonderful. Or perhaps, if you have both and they're still going at it all the time, well, then you need some kind of an orchestra leader, okay? Then you need some part of you that tells the critic, okay, we've heard enough of you now, and now um, we'll go ahead and do what we were going to do. Yeah.
I like that. We've talked about before also giving the one that you've created who's saying things that aren't helpful a voice of someone that you absolutely despise. So that it's easier to say like, well,
Yeah.
you're dumb, so I'm not going to
Yeah.
listen to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. But well, I think we have to give these voices some credit where credit's due.
Mhm.
I mean,
Sometimes.
they're there trying to protect us.
Right.
They're there trying to, make sure that we're buttoned when we leave the, the restroom, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's all good. It's just they take their job a little too seriously sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. I was having some computer issues. I think I have them fixed now, but I was trying to fix them like in a panic. So I don't think you heard anything, but folks listening might have heard some computer noises that hopefully you won't hear anymore, even if they are happening. But I think I got it. I think I got it.
So those weren't voices in their heads.
No, those are not.
You said something.
Those are legitimate. I always listen. I am a technological black hole sometimes, and today apparently is one of those days. Normally they happen before the stream, which is why I have folks join like 15 minutes early, because I always have something that goes wrong. This time it just happened to go wrong in the last few minutes, which is okay, whatever. We roll with it. It's just fine. So switching a little bit now, you've developed your own approach to psychotherapy that you call reflective eclectic. So could you explain what that means and what therapeutic techniques that leans on a little bit?
Well, it comes from the fact that I'm old and I've been doing this for many, many years, and I've been through a gazillion different conferences and been trained in a lot of different techniques. And I found I don't like any of them to use constantly, but I think they all have a place. I mean, for instance, if I have somebody who's suffering a great deal due to depression, then I'm probably going to be very cognitive behavioral with that person, trying to keep it pretty simple and have some things that they can do. If they're suffering from, say, some anxiety, I'm going to make sure that they know some relaxation techniques and that kind of thing. I don't do that with everybody. But if a person is able to get through the day pretty good and is primarily interested in why they do the things they do, then we have to take some other kinds of approaches. And depending on the person's, I often try a few things, and whatever seems to get them going is generally the thing that I stick with that person. But I might try schema therapy with some folks who are, the engineer types, let's just say. Yeah.
What is schema therapy?
What is schema therapy?
Yeah.
Schema therapy was a therapy designed to address people for whom cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't work. Okay.
Okay.
So you're basically taking a look at your cognitive biases. What those are your schemas, and then you're trying to develop some other kinds of methods beyond that. For some for a lot of people, I like to imagine different parts of you, like we were just talking just a few minutes ago. You had the voice, you had the inner critic in your head. Okay, well, stop saying that's you. Okay, that's just part of you. That's not really you. Okay, let's give it a different name. All right, we're not creating multiple personality here. We're just doing an exercise here to be able to create some distance between you and that thought.
Right.
Okay, so this then gets us more into the direction of internal family systems types of approaches. Sometimes then if they really get to this kind of thing, I'll have them actually conduct a dialogue or play act that person's voice. Okay. And this is a method of active imagination that originated with Carl Jung. Okay. Um, Folks who talk about their dreams, we talk about dreams. We see what kind of meaning that they have. So I use a lot of different kinds of approaches, and I think it's. Uh, I don't think the approach really matters quite as much for successful therapy as the relationship that develops between the client and the therapist.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, this is something that research has proved time and time again, that the various techniques and schools of thought of psychotherapy, they're all roughly equal, provided you apply them to the right kind of people. But the thing that really matters the most is the relationship with the therapist. And so that's primarily the thing that I focus on. So this is what's known as eclectic, is picking from a lot of different places and trying to apply it when it's useful. Now, the reflective part is, I'm trying to think about what I'm doing. I'm not just doing it.
Right.
Okay.
You don't just go down a checklist of like, we tried that, it didn't work. We tried this, it didn't work. We tried that, it didn't work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's neat. I mean, it's good that you have a lot of things that you've experienced and that you've learned about, and then you're kind of equating those to what the person sitting in front of you, or I don't know if you do it on Zoom or whatever, but the person on the phone or anything like that, what's going to benefit them the most. I think that that's really important. And I feel like that is very similar to the saying about which diet is the best. They're all equal. If you're trying to lose weight, what you want is something that is healthy and also something that you're able to stick to, and that's the one that you want. So if you're able to find a therapist who you have a healthy relationship with and they're able to help you find what works for you, then that's the right way to do therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I know, and we've been talking about it a little bit tonight also in the context of finding peace and reconciliation, but feedback is integral to personal growth. So how do you encourage your clients to provide feedback during therapy with you? And how can folks use feedback in their personal lives to enhance their own relationships as well?
Well, feedback is how I define whether I have a healthy relationship with a client or not. If the person is able to tell me that they like something or didn't like something I did, or something was meaningful, or some other thing just seemed like a bunch of garbage, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. I'm actually looking for a dissatisfied client, if you believe it or not, right? Because at least we're talking.
Right. And being honest.
Yeah, and I don't mean the type of dissatisfaction where you're never happy. I mean, the type
Tried
that has
that. I didn't
some
like it.
constructive criticism. So this give and take, I think, is really essential for this. Now, that being said, it's very hard to get. I've tried lots of different things. I've tried having people fill out surveys right afterwards, but I don't like doing that because, I go to the bank and they ask me to fill those things out. I never fill them out. I hate it. Okay. Right. So I don't want to ask people to do it, but I do want to be open to feedback. Okay. So one thing that I do that I don't think a lot of therapists do is at the end of a session, we have to write a note so we remember what the heck you said, right? It's okay. So I write my note, but I'll send it to you afterwards. I'll send you a summary of our discussion. And so this gives you an opportunity to see just what I heard. Okay. And then I ask at that thing, for corrections, and I ask for your feedback, and and I like it when I get it.
That's really neat. I feel like I would get a lot out of that actually because my therapist makes her notes and everything, and that's great. I don't read them. I've never even thought to ask to read them necessarily. But I think that would be really neat to say like, hey, here's a summary of the conversation, and that way, as I'm reading through it, I can go, oh, I did say that, or oh, that's not quite what I meant when I said that, and it kind of opens it up a little bit, like we were talking earlier about acknowledging what someone says so that they have a chance to kind of correct it a little bit. I think that that's really good. And I'm sure that does encourage feedback.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, right. Good job. You heard what I said in our session. Or holy shit, you really dozed off in the middle, didn't you? Yeah, I feel like that would encourage a lot of feedback. So have you always done that, or is that something you implemented at some point?
At some point when it got to be easier to do it. I tried it once before computers, and it was just too much hassle.
Oh, I'm sure.
The letters, right? but now it's easy. I just write the note, and I can send it to you by encrypted email, and you get it. Now I can't write it the same kind of way that I would write it for professionals to read with all that jargon and everything. But I found that the jargon really gets in the way. Anyway.
Yeah. Have you noticed an increase in feedback since you started doing that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't really made a systematic study of it. But
sure.
Yeah.
It's just in all your spare time, right? Between writing books and running a practice and dealing with insurance and everything. Yeah.
Right. And people often, not everybody likes it. I mean, I tell people if you don't want to read it, you don't have to, of course. But sometimes, particularly after the very first session, when they tell me the whole story and then it's all written there, they're able to see things that way about their own story that they couldn't see while they were living it and talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that would be, I feel like, really, for me, although, okay, so let me think about that for a second, because then during my session, I might find myself remembering that, oh, I'm going to get a summary after, and I have to get an A+ on my summary.
You have to get an A+? Okay.
Which is, that's something that I talked to my therapist already about. But yeah, it's like, am I going to hold back if I know I'm going to get a summary? But that's a very me thing. So
yeah.
But it would be really cool. That would be really neat. I like the idea. Are there any self-exercises or anything that you feel like everyone could benefit from doing more?
Well, this wasn't a self-exercise really, but that whole process of reflective listening with other people, I think that's a skill that everybody should have. But let me tell you a story here. Years ago, I would go to these conferences, and these therapist types, they would always want to start off by some kind of a relaxation thing. Shut your eyes and, come, let's go walking on the beach in our imagination. And I always hated that. I hate that stuff. Okay. Don't ask me to relax. I didn't come here to relax. So, but I learned how to do it. I learned, like, say, square breathing and that kind of thing. Would never inflict it on any of my clients because I hated it when I had to do it. But then I was working in a big clinic, and there was one client there that had attempted suicide, I don't know, 20 or 30 times or something like that. And none of the therapists wanted to work with her anymore. And so I was new, and so I got her. And, she had an appointment with me, and she came and she checked in with a receptionist and went right back to the ladies' room and slit her wrist.
Wow.
And so somebody sees her, okay, and they call the ambulance, and it takes the ambulance a few minutes to come, and their wrist is all bound up and everything. They didn't know what to do with her, so they put her in my office with me. And here I was. I never met the woman before. All I know is what I know about her, and I could see her, and her adrenaline was going like
Yeah.
crazy, and so was mine. I had
Right.
no idea what to do. So I decided, this is when you do square breathing. So I led her in this square breathing thing. Okay. And we only got once around. Okay. Um, and then the ambulance came and off she went.
Right.
And I never saw her again for a couple of years. I didn't see her until I took my car in for an oil change, and she was the mechanic.
Wow.
And she comes to me and she says, "You know that thing you showed me? Okay. I keep on doing that. I haven't been to the hospital since."
Wow.
Okay. Now, I don't want to take any credit for this thing.
Right.
Okay. Because I'm sure before I did this, probably a dozen other therapists tried to teach her square breathing, and she might have been just like me,
I hate this. Right.
But that was just the right time to do it. Okay. It was just the right time, and it gave the right effect. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it's going to take your anxiety down a couple notches. And sometimes that's enough. Okay. And it was enough for her.
Yeah. That's really neat. I mean, I love things like that because if you have the exercises in your toolkit and you know when to apply the exercises as needed, it's not that you have to do box breathing every time you have an anxious thought. But if box breathing is going to help you, or something like popping a warhead in your mouth when you're having a panic attack is going to help you,
okay,
then that's when you need to do it. It's not that you need to box breathe every moment of every day. It's not that you need to constantly have a warhead in your mouth. It's that in that moment, that's when it could be really helpful. Yeah. I love that you're able to help her in, just through that adrenaline rush of everything that was going on, and that you were able to connect with her later. Like, what are the odds, the chance counter of going to the mechanic and seeing her again? That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I mean, I was able to teach her this thing at a very teachable moment. And so it really stuck. Right. Now, most of the time we don't get that. And then I think it does require a lot of practice to learn how to do this stuff when you're not too upset. So when you really are upset, you remember to do it. Okay. It becomes second nature then. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's a good point too. If you constantly had a warhead in your mouth, I bet it wouldn't work for panic attacks anymore. Right. It would not be a shock to your system anymore. You'd have to switch to like something, I don't know, really spicy, or that's probably a bad idea. Yeah. Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. And I have this magic wand here. If you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be? Oh, so you have the power. Okay.
I'm gonna try to have the power.
Mental illness is not just a brain disease that can be solved by medication or techniques or any of those things. It's also a disease of connection, and it sometimes causes and causes of disjointed relationships, and uh, repairing them has got to be part of recovery as much as, stopping the drinking or, taking the pills or doing the yoga, doing the square breathing or any of those things.
Yeah, that's a great one. Because it does go back to what are you connected to? Who are you connected to? Can't just live your life in a vacuum. How boring would that be, honestly?
I a little while ago I went hiking in the wilds of Pennsylvania, which they're pretty wild sometimes. Some places. I was in a place where I didn't see people for days, and I was thinking to myself, "Look at me! I'm all independent of everything." But then I thought, "You idiot! You didn't make your hiking boots. You didn't lay out this trail. Your wife is home taking care of things. Independent my ass." None of us are independent. Okay. We're all, part of this vast web of interdependency.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we don't know that. We don't realize that. We think we're alone.
Yeah. Don't connect two and two together. You ever seen the show Alone?
Yeah.
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 People go on that and they're like, oh, it's not going to bother me to be by myself in the woods. And then by the end of their however many days they last in the woods in these harsh conditions, which some of them don't go home because of loneliness, but some of them do go home because of loneliness. But no matter what, at the end of those days, when they see their person come up behind them and say, you're done, you did it, the end, they're always happy. Like there's not one person who's like, I hate you, I wish you weren't here. It's always like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in however many days. It's been awful. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm with you. It's really cool. And that's something that no matter what you think, you need people.
Yeah.
Well,
can't have people, then cats sometimes will do.
Cats. Okay, well, I woke him up. Cats are great. He's like, that's me. You're talking about me? Yes, we're talking about you. Well, we're kind of at the end of the stream here. So if any folks in the chat have anything to ask, feel free to pop it into the chat and we'll get it asked. And Keith, I'll just open it up to you and say if there's anything that we didn't talk about or anything you want to throw out there as far as resources or sites or anything like that. I'll just give you the floor for a little bit.
Oh dear. Oh, I hope somebody put something in the chat. Look, I'm a therapist. I respond to other people talking first. Just come up with this stuff on my own.
Well, I'll put your website on there at least.
Okay.
And that way folks can go on and, if you're looking for books or anything like that, I did also post a Goodreads link to one of your books earlier. So you can click on the author piece of that and it'll link you to some of the other books that Keith has written and you can connect that way. And Bitemark says, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I love learning new things and adding tools to my toolkit. Yes.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you so much for being here, for joining us and taking the time out of your evening.
Okay, it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you believe we have reached the end of another episode? Time truly flies when you're diving into the deep waters of wisdom. I hope you found Keith's insights as enlightening as I did, from navigating conflicts to the magic of genuine apologies. It's like we've been equipped with a toolkit for emotional exploration. I don't know about you, but I am feeling ready to tackle whatever life tosses my way, armed with empathy, understanding, and maybe a sprinkle of creativity. Remember when Keith spoke about the importance of feedback? Well, I would love to hear from you. drop me a message, share your thoughts, maybe tell me your go-to taco toppings, because tacos do make everything better. Before we part ways, let's spread some podcast love. If you enjoyed today's episode, and I am sure you did, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a review. Your words are like a warm hug for me and for the show, and they help other fantastic folks just like yourself find me. Now, as you step back into your day, carry these insights with you. Whether you're sipping your morning coffee, stuck in traffic, cooking dinner, or contemplating the mysteries of the universe, let the art of finding peace and reconciliation be your companion. As always, you are not alone in this journey. Until next time, keep embracing the messiness of life, and most importantly, keeping the incredible soul that you are. This is Mama Foxfire signing off, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Take care.